Chapter 12 New Beginnings 2011 19 cities 1600 volunteers. For Matt, 2011 was a routine year with regard to the growth. That year, Matt expanded to 6 new cities: Coimbatore, Visa, Vijayawada, Lucknow, Bhopal, and Gwalior. But there were big moments too. If the Mumbai half marathon was to be my big moment of 2011, Matt's big moment was probably the Mad Values document. During the National Conference 2010, there was a 2-day workshop facilitated by Akshay Cherian, Jitin's mentor and founder of Careercraft, that documented the Make a Difference values and culture. Through the course of 48 hours, all those in attendance at the conference were involved in intense brainstorming to define the idea of make a difference. While MAD would continue to grow and change over time, these were to be the few things that would never change in MAD. Ideals that would hold together all the masters over generations. Incidentally, 2011 brought MAD another award. MAD was the Dasra Peer Capital winner 2011. But despite all the good tidings, there were some niggles that surfaced during the course of the year. As MAD grew rapidly, there was mounting pressure on the MAD leadership to keep up with the pace. The increased workload and the stress under which Jitin operated was beginning to tell on him, and his mentor Akshay Cherian was worried that he was headed for a burnout. Akshay decided that an intervention was required. Jitin concurred, and in conclusion, Samarat Agrawal joined MAD national team as the COO. Samarat was no stranger to MAD. He had joined MAD Delhi as a volunteer as far back as 2009, when the Delhi chapter had just been set up and had gone on to become the president of MAD Delhi. He knew firsthand what it took to establish and stabilize a city. So, when Akshay Charan needed someone who could take up the onerous task of overseeing the MAD operations during this volatile period, it was Samath that he turned to. Interestingly enough, Samath and Jitin both had similar academic backgrounds, except for the MBA that Jitin had planned on when MAD happened to him. Samath was an investment banker with an MBA, the quintessential corporate guy, and on the face of it, an oddity on the national team of a non-profit like MAD. But this worked out surprisingly well for MAD. Samath brought a great deal of professionalism to an organization which had more or less learned on ground as it went along. Junior, who worked closely with Samath, credits him with not just scaling MAD to 23 cities, but also consolidating the gains by putting systems into place and streamlining the operations. It was a period of expansion and consolidation, not just on the ground, but also of the processes and administrative systems, says Junior. The national team, which had a skeletal staff strength of 6, was bolstered to provide adequate administrative support to 23 match cities. Samath gathered the national team into a tight-knit unit. He ran a very tight ship, provided the clarity required for task completion, and ensured a rapid learning curve for those who worked alongside. Samath headed the MAD operations for the 2 years, 2011 to 2013. He oversaw the expansion of MAD to 23 cities, down from the original plan of 40 cities. Instituted the annual Act 2 2012 and brought the idea of iHub 2012 to fruition. In December 2011, Jitin voted with his feet and moved to the MAD head office at Bangalore. The move wiped out whatever little life he had outside of MAD. And so, even if nothing had changed in terms of priorities, it was still a new beginning of sorts for Jitin. As for me, 2011 began with a bang, the half marathon in January. But my journey as a runner began way back in June 2010 when buoyed by my conversation with Reza. I had decided to tackle my bucket list. And right there, on the top of the list, was a long cherished dream to run the half marathon in Mumbai. At 43, it was a dream that had already been put off for too long, and so I took it on with a certain sense of urgency. With my newfound damn the consequences attitude, I had signed on for January 2011 without giving it too much thought. In hindsight, this was the wisest move of all, because thereafter not only did I have to deal with an avalanche of skepticism, but also with my own trepidation and, most importantly, lack of physical fitness. I could barely cover half a kilometer with much huffing and puffing. The internet was of little use. All the running sites spoke about lions, gazelles, unleashing your potential, and the ilk. None of them catered for someone who could barely bend over to tie her shoelaces. It was all terribly demoralizing. What I needed was good advice, and so I turned to the children. Both my sons were terribly excited. My younger son checked the details of the race, noted the last prize amount, and squeaked, Oh, do you get to keep the prize money, or do you have to give it to make a difference? That was reassuring. When I broached the topic with my grade 3 children at school, they were equally excited. How are you going to Mumbai? By plane? How far is 21 kilometers from my house to school? How fast can you run? Do you run every day? Where do you run? Will you go and see elephant caves in Mumbai? Will you bring back Chiki for us from Mumbai? Nothing about how impractical or improbable the venture was. It was simply a fun thing to do, and that was the only consideration. I made up my mind. Now, now that there was no turning back, I began training for the race. My advantage, my advantage was the early start. I began in July 2010 as soon as I had registered, and that gave me 6 months to get ready. There were schedules plenty on the internet, but I would have to attain some basic competence before I could use them. My running capacity was so poor that I could not measure my progress by kilometers. Straight lines it would have to be. When I began, I could run the distance of 3 light posts. By the end of the month, I had upped it to 10. So after a month all, I had to show for my efforts was less than half a kilometer. If I had stopped to calculate the rate of progress, I would probably have quit right then. But by the end of the month, I had begun to look forward to that 30 minutes when I put on my shoes and walked out the front door. There was something so spirited and free about getting out and getting away that I couldn't stop. Finally, at the end of 2 months, I could complete a 2-kilometer run. Thereafter, my progress was exponential. Beginning of November, I could do a 6-kilometer run. But that still left me with just 2 months to hit 21 kilometers. And there was no way to back out of this because my class children had trumpeted the news of my venture all over town. Everyone at school was looking forward to the event. Plenty of parents had called to wish me luck. In fact, it was beginning to seem like the only topic anyone ever brought up around me. The pressure was beginning to tell, and I had a bout of severe performance anxiety. Try as I might, I could not cross the 8-kilometer barrier. A couple of weeks went by, and suddenly it was 6 weeks to the big day. By now, I was no longer feeling the stress because I was in the extreme panic zone. Some nights I couldn't sleep for anxiety, and I had recurring dreams of missing the marathon because of a faulty alarm clock. I didn't need a psychiatrist to interpret that dream for me. Then one Sunday morning, I hit upon a strategy to overcome the psychological block. I set off bright and early and hit the highway near my house without money or my mobile. I reasoned that if I covered the 8 kilometers down the highway, I would then have no option but to head back along the same route to get back home. That would be 16 kilometers dusted and done, and goodbye psychological block. Great strategy, but I had not accounted for the burning lungs, aching legs, or the pain radiating through every cell in my body midway through the run. At 10 kilometers, I was overwhelmed by a sense of desolation as my body threw in the towel and I was ready to keel over. Panic set in when I realized that I would not be completing the run. I stopped by the side of the road, heaving and sweating. I wanted to stamp my feet and howl at the unfairness of it all. I was trying so hard. Why couldn't it work out for me? The little Menden tantrum did nothing to make me feel better. So, I threw an actual one. I stood by the side of the highway, watched the trucks zooming by, and howled in misery. I cried for all the pain I was feeling, for the effort which was in vain, and while I was at it, I wept for my past life failures, the children's hardships, and just about anything I could think of. I wallowed in the quagmire till I had run out of tears. Then I took stock of the situation and realized that my strategy had worked just too well. I had no means to get help and no way to get back home except by continuing to move. However, after lamenting all the injustices in the world, I was feeling infinitely better. So, I dried my eyes, dragged a few painful breaths into my burning lungs, and continued running. Not long after, my body crashed and my brain ceased to function. Regardless, I managed to keep moving because by then I had breached the pain barrier and discovered secret of mind over matter. 2 hours and 16 kilometers later, I returned home, battered on the outside, but beaming on the inside. It was a moment to savor, and it probably gave me more satisfaction than even completing the half marathon did. The next weekend, when I went to teach at Sneha Children's Home, I didn't tell the children about my effort as I had planned. But I felt a lot more secure about being their teacher. I felt more worthy of their love and attention than I had before. Having conquered 16 kilometers, I had somehow earned the right to their respect. But then, we are but silly creatures of straw. It takes so little to blow us away, so little to secure us, and so little to put a little stars into our spines. Eventually, I completed the half marathon in Mumbai in January 2011 with a respective in January 2011 with a respectable timing of 2 hours and 40 minutes. And the children in my class got Mumbai Chikki. I did not win any prize money, but I did manage to raise rupees 65,000 for MAD and appease Jitin's long-standing demand for fundraising. Thereafter, I ran 2 more half marathons to raise money. The run was a tiny victory in itself, but a huge game changer with respect to my outlook in life. Success, I realized, came to the last one standing and not the first one past the post. The experience left me with a strong belief that, given time and persistence, failure was impossible. By now, I was beginning to realize that although work in the social sector is supposed to change lives of the less privileged, this may not always be the absolute truth. In my case, it had certainly been the other way around. Since I joined Make a Difference, the greatest things, the greatest changes that had come, the greatest changes that had come about had been in my own life. Into my life came all these people who had gone through life experiences that went beyond my worst nightmares. I watched them wade through traumas that I am afraid to even put into words and emerge on the other side, whole and human. We are made and unmade by the worst moments of our lives. Watching others slay demons barehanded is what remade me. The children I worked with at the street shelter were certainly victims of terrible injustices, but they were also heroes who were attempting to surmount unbelievable odds. Helping them make the climb was like carrying the bags for a mountain climber. It was a privilege, not charity. And besides, assisting the attempt meant that I too got closer to the peak. I was more alive than I had ever been. Before I joined MAD, my life was headed towards an ending filled with regrets. Because the world that I had put together was a personal space that was safe and comfortable. Locking doors, keeping out strangers, avoiding trouble, I played it safe. What I was actually doing was constructing a prison for myself. Each new fear forging one more bar and shutting out another bit of the world until I had effectively caged myself in. I felt secure within the little space that I had shut myself into. It became my own little temperature controlled space within which I existed with safe people like me. All my energies were directed towards keeping that balance by holding back the world at my doorstep. And holding back the world is hard work. It eats away into your life, leaving no room for much else. Looking back, I can see how shrunken and small my life had become. But how could I know better? Who would point it out to me? Everyone I knew was living the same life, making the same mistakes, shying away from the light instead of embracing the world, cutting out the unsafe, the uncomfortable, the inconvenient, in effect, cutting out life itself. When I met Jitin for the first time, his vision of MAD left me with a lingering sense of sadness, and that I could not explain at the time. Today, I know what it was. Regret for the lost dreams of childhood. Like every child, I too had dreamed of an epic life which would resound through the world like a soaring symphony. I had planned on excitement, passion, and heroism. I had planned on fighting injustice and changing the world. And then, instead of conquering the world, I had settled for the stretch of road between workplace and home and a comfortable spot in front of the TV. I allowed the world outside to dribble into my life only through newspaper sheets, flickering screens, and elaborate holidays. And when discontent crept in, I gripped about the condition of the roads and the TV shows, allowing tribbles like these to determine my happiness instead of grappling with the real source of my unhappiness. Unhappiness is perhaps too strong a word to describe the restlessness which constantly surfaced. But there was too much left undone for me to feel truly fulfilled or happy either. Gloria was right when she said, unless you are working at something bigger than your own life, you can never be happy. When I built deep roots within the community, turned my face to the sun, and opened my arms to the floor, those empty spaces within my heart begin to fill up. Matt and Sneha's children's home together had saved me from the fate of fading and graying like a mushroom huddled within a shady little hideaway. I love Matt, which taught me the art of living by giving me a cause worth dying for. But Sneha's children's home is even more special. After my home and school, Sneha Children's Home is a place where I have spent maximum amount of time in Kochi. A place of warm memories and hard lessons. If Kochi finally became home to me, it is because of Sneha Children's Home and every child there whose path crossed my own. But how much I loved Sneha Children's Home was something I realized only when my beloved edifice began to crack and crumble under the advance of the glass house next door.